I was thinking Moses Atelma versus Joe Joyce would have been the fight to make. And I was thinking that before the end of the year because the Telma, they're looking to move him fast. So I was thinking him versus potentially Joe Joyce is the fight to make. But Frank Warren has revealed with Boxing News that he's planning to make Joe Joyce versus Tony Yoka in the near future and has now signed Yoka and wants to stage a professional rematch following on from their controversial fight in the Rio 2016 Olympics. Frank Warren. Frank, do you think we need to sign more heavyweights? Yes. Simple as. Frank Warren gets it. And I've said this since pretty much I've started the channel. If in doubt, put a heavyweight on the card. It just works. Fury versus Ngannou. That fight, that whole show, when it emerged, it was all heavyweights. It gave people a little bit more intrigue, a lot more intrigue really, into that card because it was all heavyweights. And I loved that card for that simple reason. And it also helped the fact that all the fights, all of them ended in knockouts. Apart from the main event, ironically. But all of them ended in big knockouts. Because you're talking about big guys with power. Now, people love that. So that's why Frank Warren is being smart. And he's signing a heavyweight like Tony Yoka, who has lost... Well, actually, didn't he have a fight that he won very recently? But before that, he lost 3 on the spin. And one of them will go down as a majority, and I think the last attack end was split. I mean, there you go. I mean, when people turn around and say, "Oh well, Fury only lost to Usyk on a split decision," okay, you go and watch Takam versus Bakoli, and you go and watch Takam versus Yoka. I should have said Yoka versus Takam and Yoka versus Bakoli. You go and watch those fights and tell me were they close? Because according to your logic, well, it was a majority, it should be close. You go tell me were those fights close? They weren't. So Tony Yoka is, I could do a whole WTF video, and people have asked me to do it, and I probably should really, because Tony Yoka, early on in his career, his pro career, when he turned over, I remember him getting ironed out in the amateurs. Forget who it was by, but it was a real bad knockout. It was before he went to the Olympics. I think it was 2013, 14. It's on YouTube if you go watch it. Cannot remember who it was who ironed him out, but it was a left hook, and this Yoka was gone. And Yoka, I remember that fight with Joe Joyce. I remember it well. To be fair, Joe Joyce probably should have got the nod, but it was close. I'm not going to say that Joe Joyce was robbed in that Olympic final. It was close, but Joe Joyce probably should have got it. Yeah, he probably should have. But look, it's amateur boxing. We know what happens in amateur boxing. I mean, we always hear, how often do we hear it? Amateur boxing, this guy, it's just crazy. I think the pro game is bad. I mean, Jesus. But I thought Yoka, when he turned over, would struggle a little bit. And I guess you could say he has. But early on in his career, which I will get to in a wee bit, the cause of it, he looked all right. And up until 2020, Tony Yoka was... I was impressed by what I was seeing. I mean, I think style-wise, when he went to Virgil Hunter, he did look a little bit like a fish out of water with the style Virgil Hunter was teaching him. He didn't quite adapt well to it, but he appeared to have good punching power. So he was in there with guys like Demetrenko. He was laying him out. The Dave Allen fight, which was a brutal fight, really, really brutal. Dave Allen's talked briefly about that on his YouTube channel, which I would recommend you go and watch. He talked about it in his Nick Webb video. And he said basically that he didn't train. And I remember that he ranked Tony Yoka very high in terms of the punching power. But he always, not in his YouTube channel, but on previous interviews, he used to speak very disparagingly about Yoka. And I can see why, because Yoka never officially failed any PED tests or anything like that. But he was suspended, I believe, for about a year for not being available or missing certain tests, not taking them, which, you can't, well, I mean, obviously he was suspended for it, but that's not a good look. And he seemed to, I don't want to say, it was really after 2020, because obviously in 2020 they were testing for something, but they weren't testing for PEDs. And I remember he fought Johan Duhaupas in France. I think that was in Paris. And I know Johan Duhaupas is durable. I know he's tough. He went in there with Povetkin as a fan with running shoes and amateur boxing shorts. lasted 6 rounds with a guy who was juiced up to the gills, and ultimately was brutally knocked out, but he took a fair old beating before. And again, you got to bear in mind, this was a guy who came to Russia to watch the fight. So he took that, and against Yoka, where he was prepared, he was stopped in a round. He was dropped with a big right hand. That Tony Yoka, who was dropping guys, durable guys like Johan Duapas, disappeared come 21. And it seemed like he couldn't even tickle these guys with some of his shots. It was, well, you know, I mean, like, there you go, you know. I'm not going to go there. But Yoka's never looked as good since. He's had those 3 back-to-back defeats, and his career is really a bit all up in the air. Joyce, likewise, you know, 2 years ago, he fought Joseph Parker, and it seemed like the world was at his feet. Mandatory for Alexander Usyk with the WBO, interim champion, looked like all was going to be good. I've always said it, and I'll stand by it. It was a stupid decision by his team to go in there when you had a guaranteed world title fight against Alexander Usyk, to go and have a voluntary fight against Zhilei Zhang. It was, look, in terms of us, fan intrigue, it was brilliant, and I enjoyed both fights. But in terms of matchmaking, it was one of the dumbest things I've seen in a long, long time. You are mandatory. You're not obliged. Look what Filip Hrgovic did. Until the Saudis put him in there with Daniel Dubois, was he ever risking that IBF mandatory? Was he in as you know what? This fighting Dempsey, the guy fought Mark flipping Demori on a Saudi show. The guy wasn't taking any unnecessary risks, and he didn't have to. He wasn't obliged to. But Joyce, in the same situation, went in there with Zhilei Zhang. And I remember at the time saying, look, that could be a banana skin. Zhilei Zhang's a big puncher. He's very good. He's very durable. That could be a banana skin, and it was. And then the rematch was even worse. And then he goes from that to fighting Cash Ali. I was going to say Kid Galahad there. He definitely didn't fight Kid Galahad. Good Lord. But he fought Cash Ali in Birmingham on Paddy's Day, I think it was, back in March gone. He didn't look good. Looked a shell of himself from the man only a year and a bit prior. And then he goes and fights Chisora in the summer. And he loses to an over-the-hill, washed-to-bits Derek Chisora on point. Gets dropped in that fight. I don't know where either guy is at. The one thing Yoka has is that he is younger. I think Yoka is about 32, 33. So he's not that, like, he's obviously he's in his 30s now, which is not ideal. You want to be ideally in your 20s, your athletic peak. But for a heavyweight, it's not the end of the world. You can have another 3, 4, 5 years. Joyce is pushing 40. I have no idea what he has left. However, I look at that fight and I think stylistically, how in God's name is Yoka going to keep Joyce off him? Because people have talked about Chisora's punching power, and by all accounts, he's a very big puncher. It might not be the most accurate, might not be able to land it, but you know, you're going to think twice. And the way Chisora fights, it'll make you. I don't see how Yoka's going to keep Joyce off him. I really don't. He is trained by Don Charles now, so let's see, has the Don Charles effect that it had on Daniel Dubois worn off on Tony Yoka? Let's wait and see. But interesting signing by Frank Warren. Interesting fight. I mean, honestly, if you ever want loser leaves town, that's it. I mean, the loser will have their 4th career loss, and it's just, stick a fork in them. Whoever loses that fight, and especially the method of the loss. I mean, if Yoka wins, you would imagine it'd be on points. If Joyce wins, I guess if Bacoli couldn't do it, Bacoli's a big puncher, then it's unlikely Joyce would be able to do it, but you don't know. Maybe Joyce could go in there, because again, that was an undefeated Tony Yoka. God knows what he's like now. So yeah, it's an interesting fight. It's a rematch from 2016, so 2 Olympic cycles later, but Iowa rematches nonetheless. And let's see. I mean, obviously we're starting to see announcements of UK shows towards the back end of the year. Frank Warren's announced a few. Boxer have announced a few. I know Eddie Hearn has announced the Birmingham show with Sonny Edwards and Galal Yafai headline. And so we're seeing the return, better late than ever, of more regular UK shows. We need them. It can't always be reserved for the Saudi shows. We like the Saudi shows. They're great. They really are. But we need these UK-based promoters to do more UK-based shows. 110%. So if that's on a UK show, I'm all for it. Happy days. I'll leave it there. I hope you enjoyed the video. Smash the like button if you could. Lads, lassies, hit subscribe if you haven't already. Peace.